I stood frozen on Aunt Margaret's porch, the air feeling like it weighed a ton on my shoulders. Liam was there, wearing that crooked smile he always wore when he knew he had the upper hand. He crossed his arms and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's just like I said." I heard muffled laughter and murmurs behind me. I felt the heat rise up my neck as every gaze seemed to judge me, cutting me into little pieces. My hands were shaking so much that I had to squeeze the lemonade glass to keep it from falling. I wanted to scream, to tell the truth, but the words stuck in my throat. The sound of voices in the background mingled with the insistent beating of my heart. It was like being in a courtroom with no right to defend myself, condemned before I even spoke. Then I realized something. This wasn't just about me. Liam was manipulating everyone, using lies to gain power. And I knew I had to prove who he really was, before it was too late. If you want to know how I turned the tables on him and exposed his lies at the right moment, sign up now. The story is full of unexpected twists, shocking secrets, and a powerful lesson about justice and courage. You won't want to miss a single detail. I'm Emma, and at 34, I've learned that people aren't always what they seem. I grew up in a large, noisy family full of secrets, the kind of place where everyone loves each other, but also holds grudges that last for decades. And in the middle of all this, messes Liam, my cousin. He has that charming way that makes people believe him without question. He's handsome, confident, and knows how to use words to manipulate others. He's always been like that. Since he was a child, he could convince even adults to do what he wanted, whether it was blaming someone else for something he did, or making up elaborate stories. But don't be fooled. Behind that easy smile is a calculating man with a thirst for control. He hates being challenged and will do anything to feel superior. And now, for the first time in my life, I was his target. Then there's my mother, Sarah. She's kind, but hesitant, the type who would rather avoid conflict than face it head-on. When Liam started spreading lies about me, she was torn. She wanted to believe me, but her loyalty to the family won out. That hurt me deeply. Seeing my own mother doubt me was like being stabbed in the back. And then there's Aunt Margaret, the matriarch of the family. With her gray hair always impeccably combed and clothes that look like they came out of an old catalog, she is the heart of our family. But here's the truth. She is blind to Liam's flaws. Maybe it's because he's her favorite grandson. Maybe it's because she can't see past his perfect facade. Whatever the reason, it has only made things harder for me. Well, I'm different from them. I'm not good at pretending or letting things slide. I'm intense, direct, and tired of being walked all over. I've always been the quiet daughter, the unassuming cousin, the one no one notices until something goes wrong. But after this story, I realized I was ready for a change. No more being the silent victim. No more letting Liam control everything and everyone around him. I needed to fight. For myself, for the truth, and for all the times he tried to bring me down. If you want to understand how these characters collided in an emotional war full of twists and turns and secrets revealed, stick with me. This journey will show you the power of difficult choices and the impact they have on those we love, and those we think we know so well. Aunt Margaret's porch always had a special smell, as if it carried memories of all the moments that had ever happened. There, that day, the air was filled with the sweet scent of roses from the garden, mixed with the warm, sweet smell of orange cake fresh from the oven. The setting sun cast a golden light on the leaves of the trees, creating long, dancing shadows on the wooden floor. It was beautiful, or it would have been, if I hadn't been about to face the biggest trial of my life. The old chairs creaked as I sat down, the sound echoing too loudly in the heavy silence that seemed to press down on my ears. There were glasses of iced lemonade on the table, condensation dripping down the sides, but I could barely touch them. My stomach was churning, as if I had swallowed rocks. In the background, I heard muffled laughter coming from the living room. familiar voices that should have brought comfort, but only increased my nervousness. The heat was stifling, even with the gentle breeze coming from the garden. It clung to my skin like a second layer, making every movement uncomfortable. The purple flowers in the ceramic vases swayed slightly in the wind, and for a moment I wished I could be like them, motionless, indifferent to the storms around them. But I couldn't run away, not this time. Inside the house, the sound of cutlery, clattering against plates, and the clinking of wine glasses filled the room. It seemed like a normal Sunday afternoon scene, the kind you expect to be peaceful and predictable. But out here, on that porch, the atmosphere was completely different. Every glance in my direction felt heavy, laden with suspicion. Even without words, I could feel the weight of other people's opinions. And then there was Liam, sitting across the table, with his arrogant smile and eyes sharp as knives. He looked relaxed, as if everything was under control. His glass of lemonade was half empty, and he twirled the straw slowly, as if enjoying the silent chaos he had created. I wanted to scream, to throw that glass away, but I knew I had to stay calm, at least for now. That scene, so familiar and yet so strange, is etched in my memory like a photograph that will never fade. That porch, once a place of laughter and light conversation, now looked like a stage set for the drama that was about to unfold. It all started with a rumor. It wasn't anything big at first, just a few words here and there. But like a small stone thrown into a calm lake, the ripples spread faster than I could imagine. And at the center of it all was Liam, the master of manipulative words. He had started spreading lies about me, twisting truths and creating absurd stories to make me look like someone I was not. The first time I heard the rumors was on Aunt Margaret's porch during one of those Sunday lunches I always found so comforting. I was serving a slice of cake when I heard a distant cousin whisper, "She cheated on her best friend, did you know?" Her tone was casual, almost indifferent, but the words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I froze for a moment, trying to process what I had just heard. Cheated on my best friend? Me? It was absurd. I had never done anything like that. But then I realized something even worse. No one was asking me directly. Everyone had already decided what to think. At first I thought I would ignore it. This story will blow over, I told myself as I washed the dishes after lunch. But it didn't blow over. On the contrary, it gained momentum. At every family gathering, people looked at me sideways, whispered among themselves, and avoided eye contact. Even my mother started acting differently. One morning at breakfast, she put her teacup on the table and said, "Emma, why did you do that?" Her words were laden with disappointment, as if I had confirmed her worst suspicions. I tried to defend myself, explaining that it was a lie, but she didn't seem convinced. That's when I understood. Liam knew exactly what he was doing. He chose something that would hurt deeply. Trust is sacred in our family. By painting me as a traitor, he not only undermined my reputation, but also isolated me from those I loved most. It was as if I were trapped in an invisible web, slowly suffocating from his lies. But the worst was yet to come. The stories began to change, to expand. An aunt commented that I had financial problems and owed money to the family. Another cousin insinuated that I was selfish and only thought about myself. Each new version was crueler than the last, and I soon realized that Liam was using these rumors to divert attention from his own secrets. He wanted to be seen as the good guy, the model son, while I took on the role of the villain. I knew I had to act before it was too late. Ignoring it wasn't working. The longer I stayed quiet, the more people would believe him. So I decided to investigate. I started watching Liam closely, paying attention to his conversations and movements. I discovered that he guarded his phone with excessive care, as if he were hiding something important. That's when I had an idea. If he could use lies against me, I could use the truth against him. But it wouldn't be easy. Hacking his phone meant crossing a dangerous line, a line I never imagined I would cross. Still, I knew I had no choice. I needed to prove who he really was, even if it cost me part of my integrity. With every compromising message I found, I felt a mixture of anger and determination growing inside me. Liam wasn't getting away this time. As I gathered evidence, I thought about the impact this would have on my family. Some would support me, others would judge me even more. But I knew that regardless of the outcome, this story would change everything forever. And maybe that was exactly what we all needed, to face the truths we tried so hard to hide. If you want to know how this silent war between Liam and me came to a head, keep reading. This is a journey full of twists and turns, courage, and difficult decisions. You won't want to miss a single detail. The first major obstacle came during a breakfast that should have been peaceful. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to stay calm while my mother poured the tea. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft shadows on the marble countertop. It seemed like a normal scene, except that I could feel the weight of discomfort hanging over us like an impending storm. My mother placed her cup in front of her and looked at me with that look only mothers can give, part concern, part disappointment. "Emma," she began hesitantly, as if choosing her words carefully, "I needed to ask you, is it true what they're saying? That you betrayed your best friend?" I felt my heart sink. Did she really think I was capable of something like that? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "Mom, that's not true. Someone is spreading lies about me." She sighed, avoiding my gaze. "I want to believe you, honey, but people have been talking, and you know how these things are. When everyone starts gossiping, it's hard to ignore." Those words cut me deeper than any knife. My own mother, the person who should know me better than anyone, was doubting me. It was as if I had been pushed out of the family circle of trust, left alone to face the silent judgments of everyone around me. I looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman who had always defended me when I was a child. But all I saw was uncertainty in her eyes. In that moment, I realized that Liam had done a thorough job. He had planted his seeds of doubt so deeply that even the people closest to me began to question who I was. And it wasn't just about me. It was about him manipulating all of us, shaping opinions to suit his own agenda. I decided I needed to act, fast. The next day, I gathered some old evidence, text messages and photos that clearly showed I had never cheated on my friend. I took out my phone and showed everything to my mom during another tense meeting. "This proves I'm telling the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. For a brief moment, I felt relief. She seemed surprised, maybe even sorry for doubting me. I didn't know that," she mumbled, finally looking at me. "I'm sorry, Emma. I think I was too hard on you." But before I could completely relax, another bomb exploded. A few days later, Liam showed up with a new story, this time involving money. During dinner with some cousins, he casually mentioned, "It's a shame Emma can't even be honest with her own family. Did you know she borrowed money from Aunt Margaret and hasn't paid her back?" I was speechless. That was completely absurd. I never touched a penny of Aunt Margaret's. But, as always, people started whispering among themselves, exchanging knowing glances. Once again, I was cornered with no way out. Now, in addition to dealing with the initial lies, I also had to prove that I wasn't a thief. That's when I decided to dig deeper. If Liam could use made-up secrets to attack me, I could use his against him. I started watching his behavior even more closely, paying attention to every detail. I discovered that he kept his cell phone like a treasure, protecting it as if it were a safe. That gave me an idea. A risky idea, but a necessary one. Hacking Liam's phone wasn't easy. I spent nights awake, researching ways to access his device without getting caught. When I finally succeeded, what I found was even worse than I had imagined. There were compromising messages, evidence of betrayals, hidden debts, and even plans to manipulate other family members. Each new discovery increased my anger and determination. But with this information came a dilemma. How far was I willing to go to expose him? Revealing these truths would mean opening deep wounds in the family, and perhaps losing some people forever. Even so, I knew there was no turning back now. I was stuck in this deadly game of mutual blackmail, and there was only one way to come out victorious, using the truth as my weapon. If you want to know how this battle escalated even further and how I faced the next challenge, keep reading. This story is far from over, and the twists and turns are just beginning. For a brief moment, I thought I had won. After showing my mother the old messages and photos, I finally felt like she was on my side again. She hugged me tightly, saying, "I'm sorry I doubted you, Emma. I should have known you would never do something like that." Those words were like balm for my wounds. For the first time in weeks, I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe I had managed to regain some of the confidence Liam had stolen from me, but the calm didn't last long. The next day, during a phone call with my cousin Julia, I realized that something was still wrong. She was one of the few people in the family I really trusted, so I got straight to the point. "Julia, what are people saying about me now?" There was an uncomfortable pause before she replied. "Emma, it's complicated. The things Liam said about you, they haven't gone away just because you showed your mom some proof. Some people still think you have something to hide." Frustration consumed me once again. No matter how hard I tried to prove my innocence, the seeds Liam had planted continued to grow, poisoning everything around me. But at least I had my mother back, or so I thought. That night, during a quiet dinner at home, she seemed hesitant again. "You know," she said as she absent-mindedly stirred her food, "Liam came to see me today. He said he's worried about you. He said maybe you've been under a lot of stress lately and that it might be affecting your behavior." My mind raced. How dare he? After everything he had done, he still had the nerve to turn the story around and make me look unstable. My mother didn't say it maliciously, but her words made it clear that she was still confused, torn between believing me or him. It was like I was fighting a ghost that no one else could see. Despite this, I decided to take advantage of this small breakthrough. If my mother was starting to question Liam, maybe I could get others to follow suit. I began working discreetly, sharing the evidence I had with a few family members I trusted. At first, they were shocked. "I didn't know Liam was capable of that," said my Aunt Susan, shaking her head in disbelief. Others also began to doubt him, and for the first time I felt like I was gaining ground. But that sense of security was deceptive. Liam wasn't going to give up that easily. At a casual family gathering, he came up with a new accusation, this time involving something even more personal. During breakfast at Aunt Margaret's house, he stared at me with that crooked smile and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Emma, sometimes I wonder if you really understand the impact of your choices. Not only did you betray your best friend, but you also put our family in difficult situations." The air seemed to leave the room. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of judgment returning like an avalanche. I had thought I was starting to fix things, but Liam was about to drop another bomb, and this time I didn't know if I could escape. If you want to know how I faced this new attack and discovered the true extent of Liam's lies, keep reading. This story is far from over, and each twist and turn will surprise you even more. Liam's new accusation hit me like a runaway train. He had a knack for turning anything into a weapon, and this time his aim was spot on. When he said those words, in front of everyone, "Not only did you betray your best friend, you also put our family in difficult situations," I felt the ground open up beneath my feet. What did he mean by difficult situations? Before I could ask for an explanation, people started asking questions. "What kind of situations?" asked my Aunt Margaret, frowning. She had always been a practical woman, but now her tone was harsh, almost accusatory. "Well," Liam continued, looking directly at me, "Emma has been making some questionable choices lately. From what I understand, she's been involved in some financial transactions. Let's just say, unethical." My head was spinning. Financial transactions. I had never touched the family money, never even thought of doing such a thing. But from the way everyone was looking at me, I could tell they were starting to believe him again. It was like watching my house of cards collapse before my eyes. The few gains I had made in regaining some people's trust seemed to evaporate into thin air. That night was one of the longest of my life. I lay alone in my room, trying to understand how Liam could make up such absurd things and still make them sound plausible. He knew exactly where to push. The family's weak spot was our fear of scandal. Money, reputation, secrets. All of these things were sacred to us. And he was using them against me without any remorse. I knew I had to react quickly, before his lies gained even more traction. That's when I decided to confront him directly. The next day, I went to his house, determined to find out what was behind this new story. When I knocked on the door, he seemed surprised to see me. "Oh, Emma," he said, feigning indifference. "What brings you here? Let's stop playing games, Liam," I replied, entering without waiting for an invitation. "What did you mean by financial transactions? What lie are you spreading now?" He crossed his arms, smiling as if he were dealing with a petulant child. "They're not lies, Emma. They're facts. You really should be more careful with the decisions you make. Some people might start investigating, and who knows what they'll find." I felt a chill run down my spine. He was bluffing. Or was he? Suddenly, I remembered something. Months ago, I had helped my mother fill out some paperwork for a small renovation at her house. Could Liam use that against me, twisting the facts to incriminate me? The possibility made me nauseous. I returned home determined to comb through every detail of my recent past. I searched through receipts, bank statements, and any document that could prove my innocence. As I did so, I realized something crucial. Liam was relying on other people's fear to maintain his control. If I could confront him publicly, exposing his own flaws, maybe I could turn the tables on him once and for all. That's when I decided to take the next step. I took his hacked cell phone and found something explosive. Messages showing that he owed large sums of money to loan sharks. It wasn't just a rumor, it was concrete proof that he was in serious trouble. But using this information meant risking everything. Exposing Liam would mean revealing things about him that could deeply shake the family. On the other hand, if I stayed quiet, he would continue to destroy my life without any consequences. I was stuck between two equally dangerous paths. I decided it was time to act. I planned everything meticulously, choosing the right moment to reveal the truth. I knew it would be during a family dinner when everyone would be together. But as I gathered my evidence, another doubt began to consume me. Would I be able to handle the consequences? After all, it wouldn't just be Liam who would get hurt. The entire family dynamic would change forever. If you want to know how I prepared for this exposure and how I dealt with the chaos that followed, keep reading. This is the part where the tension reaches its peak, and nothing will ever be the same again. Now, more than ever, I was at a crossroads. I had in my hands the evidence that could completely expose Liam. Messages, photos, and even recordings that showed his debts to loan sharks, his betrayals, and his calculated lies to manipulate all of us. But at the same time, I knew that exposing all of this would not just be a blow to him. It would be an earthquake that would shake the entire family. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the laptop in front of me. The screenshots of Liam's conversations were there, relentless, like loaded guns ready to be fired. Each line was a time bomb waiting to explode. The question was, Did I have the right to detonate them? On the one hand, he deserved it. He had dragged me into the center of a fake scandal, isolated me from my family, and made everyone doubt me. I was just giving him a taste of his own medicine, right? But on the other hand, using this information meant destroying something bigger, the perfect image the family had always tried to maintain. Aunt Margaret, for example, would never accept that her favorite grandson was a compulsive liar involved in shady financial dealings. My mother was already fragile from the recent revelations. How would she react to learning that Liam was even worse than we thought? That's when I found myself thinking about the consequences. If I exposed Liam publicly, the family would probably fall apart. Some would take my side, but others would blame me for causing this chaos. And what about the children in the family? My younger cousins looked up to Liam. What would happen when they found out who he really was? Was it worth destroying so many lives just to prove a point? I spent hours debating with myself. I called Julia, my closest cousin, for advice. "You need to decide what's most important to you," she said after hearing my dilemma. "If you want justice, you have to be prepared to face the consequences. But if you're doing this just for revenge, maybe you should think twice." Her words echoed in my mind. Was revenge what I was seeking? Or was it justice? I thought about all the times I had been judged unfairly, all the nights I had cried alone because of his lies, but I also thought about Aunt Margaret, who had always been like a second mother to me, and how devastated she would be to see her grandson exposed like this. In the end, I decided I would do what needed to be done, but not without weighing my options. I decided to divide the evidence into two parts, one containing the most serious secrets, which would immediately put Liam in check, and another with details that could be used only if necessary. I wanted to give him a chance to admit his mistakes before revealing everything publicly. Maybe, just maybe, he could acknowledge the damage he had caused and apologize. But Liam wasn't the type to admit defeat. When I confronted him in private, showing him some of the incriminating messages, he just laughed. "You really think this is going to change anything?" He crossed his arms, overly confident. "They'll judge you for hacking into my phone first. You'll look crazy and desperate." His words hit me like a punch in the stomach. He was right. This was his last card to play. If I exposed everything, he would try to paint me as the villain, again. And he might just succeed. Even so, I knew I couldn't back down. Not after everything I'd been through. I decided I would do it at the next family dinner, when everyone would be together. I planned every detail meticulously, from the exact moment I would show the evidence to how I would deal with the reactions. I knew it would be chaotic, painful, and possibly irreversible. But I also knew that if I didn't act now, he would remain in control. If you want to know how this plan unfolded and how I faced the consequences of such difficult choices, keep reading. This is the part where the truth finally comes out, and no one comes out unscathed. The day of the dinner finally arrived, and I was in a state of nervousness that I could barely hide. From early on, my mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. I knew I had a plan, meticulous, calculated, perfect on paper. But I also knew that plans can fail when confronted with reality. And that reality included Liam, whose ability to manipulate people had always been frighteningly effective. As I got ready for dinner at Aunt Margaret's house, I mentally went over every detail. The evidence was saved on a flash drive hidden in the inside pocket of my coat. Aunt Margaret's laptop was already set up to project the incriminating messages onto the big TV in the living room. Everything seemed to be in place, but something inside me screamed that it wouldn't be that simple. I arrived at the house early, before the others, to make sure everything was ready. When I turned on the computer, I felt a pang of guilt. Not for invading Aunt Margaret's space, but for the chaos I was about to unleash. She loved those family gatherings. They were happy times, full of laughter and old stories. After tonight, nothing would be the same. The guests began to arrive, and the atmosphere initially seemed calm. Everyone was chatting animatedly, laughing and sharing news about work or their children, but I knew that lightheartedness was just a facade. Beneath it ran the same whispers and judgments that had haunted me for the past few months. Liam was there, of course, displaying his usual charm. He greeted everyone with that easy smile, as if he owned the place. When our eyes met, he raised an eyebrow, as if he knew something was about to happen. The tension grew with every passing minute. During dinner, I tried to keep a calm appearance, but my heart was pounding in my chest. The food was delicious. Homemade lasagna, Aunt Margaret's specialty, but I could barely get 2 bites down. Every time someone made a joke or told a funny story, I felt a lump in my throat. That feigned normality only made everything harder. That's when Liam started to act up. In the middle of dessert, he raised his glass as if to make a toast. "You know," he said in his smooth, engaging voice, "it's amazing how our family has always stuck together, even in the face of little challenges." I stared at him, feeling my blood boil. I knew exactly where he was going with this. Little challenges was the perfect euphemism for the lies he had spread about me. He continued, "But I think it's important to remember that trust is the foundation of everything. Without it, any relationship can fall apart." That was the last straw. How dare he talk about trust? My whole body was shaking as I fought the urge to interrupt him right there and then. But I knew I had to wait for the right moment. When dinner was over and everyone started heading to the living room, I realized it was now or never. I stood, up slowly, feeling all eyes on me. My hands were shaking as I took the flash drive out of my pocket, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Before we continue," I said loudly enough to get everyone's attention, "I think everyone here deserves to know a few things." Liam stared at me, his smile fading for a moment. He knew I had something prepared, but he still seemed overly confident. Maybe he thought no one would believe me, or maybe he really believed he would get away with it, like he always had. I plugged the flash drive into the laptop and projected the first messages onto the TV screen. The conversation stopped. Immediately, I saw perplexed faces, wide eyes, and open mouths as the evidence appeared one by one. Debts to loan sharks, betrayals, blatant lies. It was all there, in black and white. But then came the final blow. While everyone was processing the information, I decided to reveal something I had saved for last, an audio recording. It was Liam admitting his manipulations in a private phone call. I pressed play, and his own voice echoed through the room. The silence that followed was deafening. If you want to know how the family reacted to this explosive revelation, and how I dealt with the consequences of that decisive moment, keep reading. This is the part where all the cards are laid on the table, and no one is prepared for what comes next. The sound of Liam's voice echoing through the room was like a final sentence, a verdict that left no room for doubt. Every word recorded on that private call felt like a well-aimed shot, exposing his manipulations, lies, and betrayals with a clarity that no one could ignore. The silence that followed was almost palpable, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. All eyes were fixed on him, some filled with shock, others with disbelief, but none of them indifferent. Liam froze for a moment, his face pale as if someone had just given him the most devastating news of his life. He tried to regain his composure quickly, forcing a nervous smile as he stammered, This is some kind of joke, right? Emma, you edited this recording, didn't you?" But I knew he was bluffing. The truth was there, clear and undeniable. There was no denying something he had said himself, in his own voice. I crossed my arms and stared at him, my posture firm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "This isn't a joke, Liam. It's the truth. And it's time everyone knew who you really are." The tension in the air was unbearable. Aunt Margaret slowly rose from her chair, her eyes glued to the TV screen as if she were stuck in a nightmare. She had always been the maternal figure, the person who held the family together with her reassuring words and unwavering optimism. but now she looked completely lost, as if the world she knew had crumbled before her. "Liam," her voice trembled, almost unrecognizable. Is it true?" He hesitated, still trying to maintain his innocent facade. "Of course not, Grandma. Emma hacked into my phone and edited those messages. She's trying to frame me because she's jealous of me." That was the last straw for me. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. "Jealous of you? You ruined my reputation, made everyone doubt me, and now you have the nerve to play the victim. You use this family as pawns in a dirty game, and now you want to blame me for what you did?" My voice was loud now, vibrating with a mixture of pain and indignation. People began to murmur among themselves, divided between believing me or Liam. Some cousins looked at me with pity, others with admiration for finally exposing the truth. But there were also those who seemed uncomfortable, as if they would rather not have to choose sides. My mother was silent, watching everything with tears in her eyes. She had already been through so many disappointments in the last few months, first with me, then with Liam, and now she seemed to be struggling to understand what the real story was. Liam realized he was losing ground and tried to change his strategy. He turned to Aunt Margaret, his expression pleading. "Grandma, you know I would never do anything to hurt our family. Please believe me. Emma is doing this out of revenge." But Aunt Margaret said nothing. She simply shook her head, as if trying to process everything she had just heard. That's when my cousin Julia stepped in, her voice cutting like a knife. "Enough, Liam. We all know you've always been good at manipulating people. But this is too much even for you." Those words were like a death blow to him. He looked around for support, but found only cold stares and silent accusations. He was cornered, with no way out. I could feel the weight of the moment growing inside me. This was the climax of months of pain, frustration, and planning. I knew I had to seize this opportunity to say everything that was stuck in my throat. I took a deep breath and continued. "I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it because we deserved to know the truth. We've all been deceived by you, Liam. And now each of us has to decide how we're going to deal with it." My heart was pounding as I waited for their reactions. I knew that night would change everything forever. For me, for Liam, and for the entire family. The next words and decisions would define the future of our relationships. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into the unknown. If you want to know how this confrontation reached the point of total rupture, and how I faced the consequences of that explosive moment, keep reading. This is the part where all truths are revealed, and where we discover that some wounds never heal completely. The silence that hung over the room was thick, like a storm about to break. Everyone was frozen, digesting the revelations, but I knew that moment wouldn't last forever. Liam, cornered and with no room to escape, made his last desperate attempt to turn the tables. He stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair behind him with a crash that echoed through the room. "Are you really going to believe her?" His voice was loud, almost hysterical, and his eyes darted from face to face, seeking support. "She hacked into my phone, invaded my privacy. That's illegal. You should be on my side, not hers." For a brief moment, I felt a chill down my spine. He was right. Technically, I had crossed a line by hacking his phone. Some people could use that against me, paint me as the villain of the story. But then I realized something important. He was only talking about himself. He didn't deny the accusations. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to justify his actions. He was only concerned with defending himself, saving his own skin. And that spoke louder than any words could. My mother was the first to react. She stood up slowly, tears still in her eyes, but her expression was firm. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling but full of authority. "If you had nothing to hide, Why would Emma have to do this? Why are you so concerned with how she found out the truth, instead of admitting what you did? Those words hit Liam like a punch in the stomach. He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. I saw the exact moment when he realized he had lost. His defenses began to crumble, and he finally looked vulnerable, for the first time since this story began. But I wasn't going to let him get away that easy. I took a few steps forward, positioning myself right in the center of the room where everyone could see and hear me clearly. You want to talk about right and wrong, Liam? Then let's talk. You spread lies about me, destroyed my reputation, and made the people I love most start to doubt me. You manipulated, deceived, and used our family to feed your ego. All while pretending to be the good guy, the perfect grandson, the reliable cousin. My voice trembled with anger, but also with pain. Every word I said was loaded with months of pent-up frustration. I never wanted this. I just wanted you to stop. But you kept going. And now, here we are. I pointed to the TV screen where the evidence was still visible. This is your truth, Liam. This is who you really are. The room exploded in murmurs. Some cousins began to confront him directly, demanding explanations. My Aunt Susan, always calm and rational, asked, Liam, are these messages true? The debts? The betrayals? Is all of this real? He hesitated, clearly torn between continuing to deny it or admitting the truth. Finally, he muttered something unintelligible, lowering his eyes to the floor. It was enough to confirm what everyone already suspected. Aunt Margaret, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. Her voice sounded fragile but firm. I don't know what to say, Liam. I always trusted you. I always thought you were different. She shook her head, as if trying to ward off a painful thought. How could you do this to your family? That sentence seemed to cut deeper than anything else. Liam staggered backward, as if he had been physically struck. He tried to say something, anything, but the words simply wouldn't come out. Instead, he lowered his head and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound reverberated through the room, leaving an even heavier silence in its wake. Everyone stood frozen, for a few seconds, processing what had just happened. I could hardly believe it myself. After months of fighting, I had finally won. But this victory wasn't sweet. It was bitter, full of scars that would never go away. If you want to know how I dealt with the aftermath of that explosive moment, and how I faced the irreversible changes it brought to my family, keep reading. This is the part where we learn that some wounds never heal completely, and that the truth can set you free, but it can also destroy you. As soon as Liam ran out the door, leaving behind a trail of shame and confusion, I thought the worst was over. But the truth is, it wasn't even close to the end. While everyone was trying to process what had happened, my Aunt Margaret did something no one expected. She walked over to the TV, turned it off with a firm click, and turned to me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a determination I had never seen before. Emma, she said, her voice sounding like thunder despite her apparent calm. What you did was wrong. I froze, not understanding what she meant. Wrong? But he deserved it, Aunt Margaret. You saw the evidence. She shook her head, her fingers clenching the hem of her dress as she struggled to maintain her emotional control. Yes, Liam deserved to be exposed. He lied, manipulated, and hurt all of us. But what you did, breaking into his phone, hacking his messages, stealing his privacy, that was wrong too. You crossed a line, Emma, and now, what's to stop someone from doing the same to you? I felt my stomach sink. Those words hit me like a punch in the chest. She was right. As justified as I felt, I had made a serious mistake. My quest for revenge had led me to adopt the same methods I had so criticized in Liam. I wanted justice, but I ended up becoming part of the problem. The others began to murmur among themselves, divided. Some agreed with Aunt Margaret, others seemed hesitant, but all were clearly uncomfortable. Even my mother, who had finally taken my side, looked troubled. "Emma," she said softly, "I understand why you did it. But maybe there was another way." That sentence cut me deeper than any previous criticism. I had been so focused on proving the truth that I had completely ignored the impact of my actions. I had spent months fighting Liam, but now I realized that I had also betrayed the values I had always stood for. Amidst this growing tension, something even more unexpected happened. Aunt Susan, always the silent observer, stood up and said something that would change everything again. "We need to remember that this family isn't perfect. We all have secrets. Maybe it's time we admitted that." She turned to me, then to Aunt Margaret, and continued. "Liam made a mistake. Emma made a mistake. And we've made mistakes by letting it get to this point. Instead of tearing each other apart, we need to find a way to move forward." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. It was as if something had broken, and at the same time, begun to be rebuilt. If you want to know how I dealt with this twist, how I learned to deal with my own flaws, and how the family found or didn't find a way to move forward, sign up now. This story is full of surprises, deep reflections, and lessons about justice, forgiveness, and the limits of revenge. You won't want to miss the ending. I knew that night would change everything, not just for Liam, but for all of us. The truth had been revealed, but sometimes the truth hurts more than we can imagine. That night was an emotional storm that left me exhausted, but it also exposed something I didn't want to face: my own reflection in the mess I had created. As everyone began to debate what to do with Liam and how to deal with my actions, I realized that I had become so determined to prove my innocence that I had abandoned parts of who I was. The Emma who had always valued honesty and integrity had been lost somewhere along the way. I went out to Aunt Margaret's porch, needing some fresh air and a moment to think. The silence outside was a stark contrast to the chaos inside the house. The roses still smelled of happy memories, but now they seemed to carry the weight of what I had done. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes, trying to organize my thoughts. I had fought so hard against Liam, but now I understood that I was also fighting against myself. I knew Aunt Margaret and my mother were right. Hacking Liam's phone was wrong, a clear violation of privacy. I justified it by saying it was in the name of truth, but deep down I knew that part of me just wanted revenge. And that was the hardest part to admit. I had allowed anger and resentment to take over. I was willing to sacrifice my principles, to defeat him, and that made me more like him than I wanted to admit. But I also understood something important. Acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward change. That's when I decided to face the family again, this time without excuses or justifications. I walked into the room where the conversations were still heated and raised my hand to ask for silence. Everyone looked at me, some skeptically, others curiously. "I know what I did was wrong," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "I'm not here to defend my actions or say that I deserve to be forgiven, but I want everyone to know that I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted the truth to come out, and I lost myself trying to get there." My mother held my hand, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emma, we know you're not a bad person, but sometimes, when we're hurt, we make choices that aren't the best." Aunt Margaret nodded, though her face still showed signs of disappointment. "What happened tonight will change our family forever. Liam needs to take responsibility for what he did, but we also need to learn from this. We all make mistakes, Emma. What matters is what we do next." That comment hit me hard. She was right. It wasn't just about punishing Liam or justifying my actions. It was about growth. I needed to accept that not everything can be fixed with exposed truths or direct confrontations. Sometimes the best way to move forward is by acknowledging our flaws and learning from them. That night, I made a decision. I would apologize to Liam publicly, not for his lies, but for crossing ethical boundaries to expose him. It wasn't fair to use questionable methods, even if my intentions were good. The next day, I sent him a short message. We need to talk. No games, just the truth. He hesitated before responding, but eventually agreed to meet. During our conversation, he admitted that he had used the people around him to feed his ego and that his actions had been selfish and cruel. There was no formal apology, but for the first time, I saw a glimpse of vulnerability in him. I also told him that I recognized my own mistakes and that I regretted invading his privacy. That conversation didn't solve everything. Far from it. But it was a start. I learned that the pursuit of justice shouldn't come at the expense of our own values. And perhaps more importantly, I learned that we are all human, imperfect, and capable of making monumental mistakes. What defines us isn't the mistake itself, but how we choose to deal with it afterward. If you want to know how this journey of self-discovery shaped my future and changed the dynamics of my family forever, keep reading. This is the part where we learn that true growth comes from facing our own flaws, and that sometimes forgiveness begins with ourselves. Meeting Liam was the turning point I didn't know I needed. It wasn't a cinematic moment, full of tears and redemptive hugs. It was more like two strangers trying to fix something broken without quite knowing where to start. He was different, less arrogant, more fragile. As we sat in a nearly empty coffee shop, he avoided my eyes as he admitted, I went too far. I just wanted to be the best, you know? I wanted everyone to like me. That took me by surprise. It wasn't an excuse, but it wasn't a complete confession either. It was just a small crack in the armor he had always used to protect himself. And although I was still furious with him for everything he had done, for the first time, I saw something. In him beyond the calculating manipulator, I saw a lost man, as trapped in his own lies as I had been in mine. I replied slowly, choosing my words carefully. You hurt a lot of people, Liam. You hurt me. But I also made mistakes. Hacking into your phone was wrong. I crossed a line I should never have crossed, and that needs to be acknowledged. He nodded, still not looking directly at me. I deserved some of that, he muttered. But you're also right. We both did things that can't be justified. That conversation marked the beginning of something I never thought possible. A tentative truce. It wasn't friendship, nor was it complete reconciliation, but it was a start. We decided together that we would tell our families the truth, the whole truth. Not just about his lies, but also about my questionable actions. It was time to lay everything out in the open, with no hiding places or half-truths. At the next family dinner, 2 weeks later, we were both nervous. I knew this would be my chance to end the story honestly. When everyone gathered in Aunt Margaret's living room, I asked to speak. The atmosphere was tense, but different from the previous confrontation. This time, I wasn't there to accuse or attack. I was there to take responsibility. I want to start by saying I'm sorry, I said, looking around the room. I'm sorry for invading Liam's space. I did it because I was desperate to prove he was lying about me. And although my intentions were good, my methods were wrong. I crossed lines I should never have crossed. There was a heavy silence, but this time it wasn't judgmental. It was reflective. Aunt Margaret nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on me. Emma, we understand that you were hurting, but as I said before, what you did was wrong. Now what? I took a deep breath. Now, I am willing to accept the consequences of my actions. If that means losing the trust of some of you, I understand. But I hope we can move forward together, learning from our mistakes." Liam then stood up, looking even more uncomfortable than I did. He cleared his throat before speaking. "I also need to admit something. I lied about Emma. I spread false rumors because I was jealous of her. I wanted everyone to see me as the good guy, even if it meant destroying her reputation. And that was wrong. I'm sorry." The impact of his words was immediate. Some cousins were speechless. Others seemed relieved to finally hear the truth from him. My mother began to cry softly, shaking her head. "We need time to process this," she said, her voice breaking. "But I believe that all of us here can change. We can learn from this." That night marked the official end of the conflict, but it wasn't a perfect ending. There were hard feelings, emotional scars that would take time to heal. Liam decided to take some time away from the family, saying he needed to get his head straight. I supported him in that decision, knowing that maybe some distance was necessary for him to find his way too. For me, the real closure came when I realized that the fight was no longer against Liam or against the family. It was against my own unrealistic expectations of perfection. Learning to accept that I am human, capable of failure and growth, was liberating. If you want to know how these changes shaped my future and transformed relationships within the family, keep reading. This is the part where we learn that new beginnings are possible, even after big falls. The months that followed were like an emotional game of dominoes, each piece falling in sequence, revealing consequences I could never have predicted. The exposure of the truth in our public confessions changed everything forever, but not necessarily in the way I expected. Liam was the first to feel the most visible impacts. He isolated himself, both physically and emotionally. Shortly after dinner at Aunt Margaret's house, he announced that he was moving to another city temporarily, claiming he needed space to reflect. At first, I thought it was just an excuse to escape the criticism and disappointed looks. But over time I realized that he was really trying to fix his life. Liam cut ties with some of his superficial friends, the ones who were only around him because he was the cool guy, and started working a simple job as a waiter. From what I heard from Julia, he was paying off his debts and trying to rebuild his reputation, step by step. It wasn't complete redemption, but it was progress. And for the first time, I felt something I never thought I would feel for him: respect. My relationship with my mother also changed profoundly. She began to see me differently, no longer as the quiet daughter who always needed to be protected, but as a woman capable of admitting mistakes and fighting for justice, even if it meant facing difficulties. She started talking more openly with me about her own flaws and insecurities, something she rarely did before. This mutual vulnerability brought us closer in a way I never thought possible. One night, over tea in her kitchen, she said something that stuck with me. "Emma, you don't have to be perfect to be loved. I just want you to be honest, with yourself and with others." Aunt Margaret, on the other hand, underwent a quiet but significant transformation. She had always been the strong, flawless matriarch, but that night in the living room shook her idealized view of the family. She began to talk more about her own past mistakes, moments when she had ignored family, problems in the name of keeping up appearances. Her demeanor changed. She became less judgmental and more compassionate. At a Sunday lunch a few weeks later, she pulled me aside and said, "No family is perfect, Emma, but the love we have for each other can help us get through anything, as long as we're willing to listen and forgive." Other family members reacted in various ways. Some younger cousins began to question their own choices and relationships, inspired by the example of transparency we had created. Others still kept their distance from me, clearly uncomfortable with the role I had played in exposing Liam. But little by little, many of those bonds began to be restored as everyone processed what had happened. I changed myself. I learned that justice does not mean revenge, and that the truth should not come at the expense of who we are. My obsessive quest to prove my innocence had distanced me from important parts of myself, and now I was determined to reclaim them. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned, such as painting and gardening, and found peace in activities that did not involve conflict or proof. I discovered that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not exposing others, but facing our own flaws with sincerity. If you want to know how these changes shaped my future and what the true legacy of this story was for me and my family, keep reading. This is the part where we learn that scars can be transformed into strength, and that even after big storms, it is possible to find calm. This journey taught me something I will never forget. The truth, no matter how painful, always finds its way to the surface. But it doesn't come without a cost. The truth is like a fire. It can illuminate the darkness, or consume everything around it, depending on how you handle it. And I learned that the hard way. When I decided to expose Liam, I thought I was only fighting him, his lies and manipulation, but in the end, I discovered that I was also at war with myself, with my own weaknesses, fears, and desire for revenge. I wanted justice, yes, but I allowed anger to blind me, to stray from the principles I had always valued. Hacking into his phone was an impulsive act, motivated by desperation, and while it revealed important truths, it also left scars that will never completely fade. I learned that no one is entirely villain or hero. Liam did terrible things, but he was also a wounded person, trying to fill voids with approval and power. I, on the other hand, fought to defend my innocence, but ended up making mistakes that made me part of the problem. We are all human, imperfect, and full of contradictions. What defines us is not the mistakes we make, but how we choose to deal with them afterwards. I also understood that families aren't perfect. They never have been for years. I idealized our family as a place of unconditional love and mutual support. But this story showed that we are just as fragile as any other family. We have our secrets, our accumulated hurts, our uncomfortable silences. And yet, despite all of that, we are still here, together, even if we are still reeling. That thought comforts me. We don't have to be perfect to be loved. We just have to be honest, with ourselves and with each other. Another important lesson was about forgiveness. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or accepting harmful behavior. It means recognizing that everyone deserves a chance to improve, including ourselves. Forgiving Liam wasn't easy, just as forgiving myself took time, but it was necessary. Holding grudges is like carrying an invisible weight, something that only prevents us from moving forward. When I let go of that weight, I realized I could breathe again. This story also made me reflect on the power of choices. Every decision we make, no matter how small, has consequences. Hacking Liam's phone was a choice that changed everything, just as his lies shaped our lives for months. But choices don't end when the consequences appear. They continue. I had to choose between continuing to feed my anger or seeking personal growth. I chose growth, and that decision transformed not only my future, but also the way I see the world. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. We are responsible for the narratives we create in our lives. We can choose to define ourselves by the wounds we receive or by the lessons we learn from them. I chose to learn. I chose to see this experience not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity to evolve, to become someone stronger, more compassionate, and more aware. If you want to know what the ultimate legacy of this story was, and how it continues to influence my life today, keep reading. This is the part where we understand that even in the biggest storms, we can find peace, as long as we are willing to look within and face what really matters.